Hey guys, Trevor Chikuti here today from SpineWise, and I want to talk to you today about why is it that you get light sound sensitivity and perhaps even sensitivity to touch whilst you have a migraine. Because if you're like most people with migraines, then what you'll tend to find is that whenever you get a migraine, or when you're about to get a migraine, and sometimes even for a day or two after you've had a migraine, you just don't want to be touched. You don't want to be in loud environments. You don't want those kids running around screaming at you and creating all this noise. So I want to talk to you about why that is and what's actually happening in your brain that's actually driving that change. Okay, so looking at the brain itself, here's a nice little image that we have of our brain itself. The area of the brain I want to talk to you about today is this area here, your brain stem. And most importantly, an area at the top of your brain stem known as your midbrain, or commonly also known as your mesencephalon. So this is a really, really important part of your brain because most people will understand the flight or fight responses, that sympathetic outflow response, and that is what this area of the brain is mostly responsible for. So if we take that area out and we just simplify it down, looking from behind, looking this way at the very top, what we kind of see is what looks like a bit of a Lego brick. And this basically is a nice little square area with these four little circles on it. And these things are called our superior colliculi and our inferior colliculi. And these are both really, really important for us. And together these things make up what we call our tectal plate. So the superior colliculus has a lot of important roles in the human body. So the first thing the superior colliculus does is it looks after vision, most importantly vertical tracking, so the ability to move up and down with your eyes. But it's also a key part that's responsible for brain mapping. So have you ever had that feeling like when you're in a different car or somebody else's car, like you just don't know where the edges of that car is? This is because you haven't given your brain ample time to actually generate a map of the outside of the car. And we have this with everything. So if you close your eyes and get someone to touch somewhere, the reason you can sense it and know or roughly understand where that is because of that brain mapping, that ability to map your body out and understand where things are. So to a great extent, that's actually controlled by this upper area here called your superior colliculus. Your inferior colliculus down here, this area of the brain is commonly associated with hearing. So it plays really important roles in hearing, and it's a really, really key area. But as a whole, this whole thing is responsible for our flight or fight responses, our defensive mechanisms. So there's a few key things that we need to understand about this. First one is, what does this area actually receive information from? And we'll get to what happens when it goes a bit crazy later on, but first thing, what happens? What are the inputs into this area? So the first thing we have is we have inputs from our eyes that go in. I'm just going to change color here, see if this one works a bit clearer for us. So we have our eyes that go in, we have input from our ears that go in as well. We have input from our jaw that goes in. We have input from our teeth that go in, and we have input from our face that goes into there. We also have input from our neck that goes into there. So pretty much everything from this area up is really going to be processed somehow or another through that midbrain area, that mesencephalon area. And the whole reason for this is we need to be able to protect our face. It's a really critical importance. So then once information comes in, I'm going to get to the reason why and how this affects migraine sufferers in just a second. I just want you to understand a little bit more here. The output from this, the where this all goes. There's a few different things. So it goes up towards your brain, and that helps control your brain arousal rate. So if that stimulation gets too high, these are people that have insomnia and can't get to sleep at night. If the brain arousal rate drops too low, these are people who develop narcolepsy and they keep falling asleep all the time. Then we have neck tension. So some of this actually heads out and goes back. We'll change colors here again. Some of this actually comes out and goes and looks after your neck muscles. So when we have dysfunction in this area, not only are these people potentially having problems sleeping at night, but they may get stiffness and tightness around their neck. Not necessarily neck pain, but just that tightness feeling. They need to stretch it all the time, the achiness that goes with that. It looks after our eye tracking, as we spoke about before. So our vertical tracking, so the ability to track objects, especially if you're playing sport, and a whole lot of things, but the other big one that really is associated with this is FFF, which is flight, fight, or freeze. They're the big ones that come with it. This is our sympathetic outflow. All right, so what does this mean for migraine sufferers, and why have I gone through this? Why is this so important for migraine sufferers? Okay, well, that's actually really simple. The main reason this is so important for migraine sufferers is because most people with migraine issues have problems with what we call the trigeminal nerve. So your trigeminal nerve is the main nerve that takes input from all of this area, from your face, your teeth, your jaw, even to some extent from the neck, and inputs it through this area. So when we have problems with the trigeminal system, what tends to happen is it tends to wind up this midbrain area, this mesencephalic area, and as it does that, it increases brain arousal rate. And if you have the right genetic predisposition, which sometimes needs to be stimulated when you're very young through stress, you wind up this mechanism, and as it gets wound up, the result of that is that your brain doesn't cope, you get this inflammatory cascade, and the result of that is our classic migraine. So the reason we get our sensitivities in terms of light, sound, touch is because this area gets wound up. The microphone from all of these areas also gets wound up. You let too much input in, and the result is all of those inputs become overwhelming. There are a ton of different ways you can wind this all down. Check out my other vids. I've done a ton of videos on ways that you can calm this mechanism down, things you can do to unwind it. But if you have any questions or want to know more about this stuff, just send me a message or post up down below and I'll go through it with you in more detail. Happy to help you out in any way you can. Anyway, that's a quick little introduction into why you get sound and touch sensitivity and light sensitivity with a migraine and how the brain is involved with that. Again, if you have any questions, just post up. My team of experts are always here to help you in any way, shape or form that we can. See you in the next vid. Bye for now.